there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid and bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. There is a ton going on in Wyoming right now. And by ton, I don't mean the ton of nuclear waste that people are trying to drag into the state, but that's going on too. The Minerals Committee met yesterday, and there were a couple of really important items that they talked about, some of which we'll get into in today's program. And then at the top of the hour at 9 o'clock, we're going to do an interview that I have been trying to set up or wanting to set up for, well over a year. And it's with a guy I met online named Shawn Meehan. And he runs an outfit called Guard the Constitution. And we're going to talk about one of my favorite things to bash on, the Convention of States. It's, this is one of those things that you got to keep talking about. It's like hitting a 10-penny nail. You can't sink it all with one shot. I mean, you have to keep hitting it over and over. At least I do. I mean, maybe Agent 29 is so adept at pounding nails that he can sink a 10-penny. I don't know. Can you do that? Is it possible?
No, I was in a race once to do just that, and it takes about 2, maybe 3 hits for me to do it. We had a kid that came to work for us, and we gave him the nickname Lightning. He never strikes the same place twice.
I used to be that way, and then I had to build a salon, and then afterwards, now I'm a little bit better than Lightning. Maybe I can hit the same spot 2 or 3 times. But anyway, we got a big program coming today, and if you haven't been paying attention to the show, this has been it's shaping up to be a pretty great week. Yesterday, we interviewed Seth Shoemaker. He's a local attorney here in Sheridan. We talked about some of the same things that former Chief Justice Kate Fox and I discussed. He had some very different ideas about it. So if you missed that show, go back and listen to it. It's a very different perspective than that of the former Chief Justice. And then today, of course, I mentioned we'll have Shawn Meehan on at the top of the second hour. And then tomorrow, we have an interview with Wyoming Speaker of the House, Chip Nyman. Now, interviewing Chip, it's you never know where he's going to be when you talk to him. Sometimes he's out sitting on a horse. Sometimes he's in his pickup. Sometimes he's in a tractor. I don't know.
It's like a box of chocolates.
Yeah, it's true. It is. And the thing that I really like about Chip is he can take a complicated subject. It doesn't really matter what it is. And he'll start out by saying, that kind of reminds me of when I was sitting out on my tractor the other day. And it starts out and you think, oh God, what is he going to say now? But when he's done, it makes perfect sense. And actually, probably one of the best speeches that I've heard on the floor of the Wyoming House was one from Chip. It was during COVID, and you talk about inspiring. That's the one where he got in trouble for saying the word crap. Immediately afterwards, Double L Lloyd Larson said damn, and nobody said a word about it. Anyway, we're going to talk to Chip tomorrow on the program, and no doubt there's a lot of stuff we got to talk to him about. He was talking to the cowpie about running for governor. So we obviously have to talk about that a little bit. I don't know what he's thinking. Evidently, I am the only conservative. Me and Agent 29 are the only conservatives in Wyoming that aren't running for governor. I assume by the end we'll have 30 or 40 people decide to run.
Well, actually, I had an announcement later.
Oh, God, not you too.
No. Oh, you said running for. I thought you said running from the governor.
Yeah, well, that's generally. No, yeah. I kind of go after him. Anyway, lots coming on the program. Make sure you stay tuned. It's going to be a fantastic couple of shows. But we begin this morning, as we always should, or at least where Gail Simmons likes to stay, in the cow pie, in an article entitled, Wyoming Won't Repeal Carbon Capture Law as EPA Targets Key Climate Regulation. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll know that President Trump signed an executive order to do away with this carbon capture mandate. But apparently, in the state that champions freedom and champions like individual responsibility and taking care of your own crap, we have to continue to have a carbon capture law. This is one that's been on the books for a couple of years. It was passed back when, it was 4 sessions ago. Anyway, a couple of years, and it's when the Redcoats controlled the Wyoming House and the Senate. Let me just read a couple of the opening paragraphs of this piece. Quote, on the same day that the EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, formally announced a proposal to repeal an Obama-era rule that declares greenhouse gas emissions to be dangerous, Wyoming lawmakers debated how effective carbon capture is as a tool to promote the burning of Wyoming coal. Quote, in the 2009 endangerment finding has served as a legal basis for U.S. regulations targeting greenhouse gases. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, Wyoming lawmakers debated the future of the state's coal industry and voted down a draft bill that threatened to gut carbon capture efforts. The draft legislation before the Joint Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee would have repealed Wyoming's reliable and dispatchable low-carbon energy standards and killed House Bill 200 from 2020 that requires utilities to evaluate carbon capture technology. Let's see. The repeal was opposed by Mark Gordon's office, which argued that the current law is effective and it should be given more time to produce results. It's working. Quote, without HB 200, utilities probably would not be analyzing the costs and the benefits of carbon capture. I mean, this is straight out of Governor Gordon's playbook. Anti-carbon, or pro. I can't even keep the stuff straight. Here's what he said about that. This is from his little meeting at Harvard. I know I've played this for you before, but I think it's important to remember where the good governor is at.
And I know what's happening on the environmental side. We've had several glaciers that have been delisted as glaciers in the West. It is clear that we have a warming climate. It is clear that carbon dioxide is a major contributor to that challenge. There's an urgency to addressing this issue.
Yeah, it's urgent.
And it isn't going to be solved only by turning off fossil fuels.
Only by turning off fossil fuels.
We've looked at, for Wyoming in particular, where we derive quite a bit of our revenue from fossil fuels.
Stop!
How do we prepare ourselves for
it's me. Sorry, Agent 29.
You're killing me over there. You're the one with the stop button on that one. So you said at the beginning of that we just want to remember where the governor stands. Well, I keep trying to figure it out because I've heard him speak 4 or 5 times. You and I just heard him speak here at Acme.
Yeah, up at the Ramaco.
Yeah, and that was a very different message.
Oh, I was wondering who the guy in the Gordon suit was. I mean, he was very much, when he's standing at a coal company's ribbon cutting, he's absolutely pro-coal and pro-energy. But when he gets away from his public appearances, then he turns into a very different governor. Now, in the soundbite, and I think this is so important to remember, he said that this whole climate crisis isn't going to be solved by turning off only by turning off fossil fuels, which logically means that it does include turning off fossil fuels. So that's where the governor's at. It was the governor that signed this stupid carbon capture thing. It was the Wyoming Senate that killed Senate File 124, which would have declared that CO2 is not a pollutant. And before they killed that bill, they gutted it in committee. And then they took it to the floor of the Wyoming Senate, and they proceeded to to vote it down. And, and it was stupid, the reason they give. Well, I don't think this bill is ready for prime time. It's been heavily amended. Yeah, I wonder who amended it. It wasn't conservatives. It wasn't the bill's sponsor. It was the rhino redcoat liberals that apparently are in control of the Wyoming Senate. So, big question here. We're anti-coal, anti-CO2. We can't pass a law that says that CO2 is actually plant food, which it is. But we're definitely in favor of nuclear energy. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And the only reason that we're in favor of nuclear energy is not because it's good for the environment. We know that nuclear waste being highly radioactive, and I don't really give a crap what you're going to store it in. The only data we have on these things is that so they're good for 40 years. All right. Well, 40 years is less than the blink of an eye in the lifespan of nuclear waste. And that's another thing, right? We're trying to monkey around with the language. I almost dropped an F-bomb there. We're trying to monkey around with the language to convince you that these spent nuclear fuel rods are not nuclear waste. Let me just give you a quick analogy, right? So if I over here on the side of my desk, I've got a stack of snacks, and I keep them there because I'm a type 1 diabetic, and every once in a while my blood sugar drops for some unknown reason, and I got to have something handy. Well, so for example, one of them is like this thing. It's like a little breakfast bar type thing loaded with carbs. It's good. Now, if I open this up and I consume the breakfast bar that's inside of it, what's left? The wrapper, right? So the wrapper is waste because they're not really going to use it anymore. And so if you compare that to, say, nuclear fuel rods, it's not nuclear, by the way, it's nuclear. There's no U in nuclear. I can't even say it wrong. I mean, that's how stupid it is. Anyway, whatever's left over, if you're not going to use it again, it is by definition waste. But I mean, I've got another piece from the Cowboy here, an op-ed from one of these shysters at Radiant, and trying to let's set the record straight on quote nuclear waste end quote. Well, they're monkeying with the language to convince you that these spent nuclear fuel rods are not waste. But the point here is how can we possibly be against coal, against CO2, but we can be in favor of nuclear waste, a technology that we absolutely know has a byproduct that is highly radioactive, that is toxic if you touch it, that has to be stored in these highly engineered, highly specified, highly complicated casts so that the radiation doesn't leak out. That's okay, but plant food is not.
Highly regulated.
Highly regulated,
That's
too.
That's the problem. When I think about nuclear power, I don't really have a problem with it, but if you do that, you are inviting the feds to be a major part of whatever you do.
Mm-hmm.
And that alone is a little bit of a warning sign to me. Never mind all of the other questions that have yet to be answered about how this stuff is going to be dealt with and held. And the other thing that bothers me, they keep saying, oh, no, this is only for our own stuff. I would guarantee you, we start a place that is perceived as safe, where you can go store that stuff. They're not going to be able to resist people saying, I'll give you big bucks.
Right, $40 billion or whatever it is. Well, let me tell you why we can be anti-coal and anti-CO2, but we can totally be in favor of nuclear waste. It is all about money, because the nuclear waste, what they're trying to convince you, is spent nuclear fuel rods, which I guess they're one and the same thing. It's all waste. But the reason why is the nuclear waste doesn't play into the climate agenda. The worldwide climate agenda has massive dollar numbers associated with it. And I bet if you looked into, probably a lot of the people in the Wyoming Senate, and certainly the governor, I mean, if you looked into, where their finances are, where their investments are, you are going to find some anti-CO2 type companies. And so it's all about money. The reason why we can be in favor of nuclear waste storage here is because that doesn't have anything to do with the climate agenda. Now, thinking people who are, actually use that thing between their ears know that, well, wait a minute. You say that CO2 is toxic and that we have to capture it from the air. But this stuff that is going to remain highly radioactive for perhaps thousands of years is not dangerous. Well, it's a non sequitur. It doesn't make any sense until you look at the climate agenda, the worldwide climate agenda, and the nuclear power just doesn't play into it. So these redcoats on the committee that voted down the repeal of the carbon capture law, that's exactly what they're doing. It's all tied in there. Now, there's an interesting video that Agent 29, you showed me this morning about how little CO2 makes up in our atmosphere. Go ahead and play that for me. Maybe. Perhaps.
In the atmosphere. Anybody want to answer that? Nobody wants to answer that. Scientifically, it's an easy question. 5 minutes on Google. 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. Carbon dioxide is 0.04%. Of that, what percentage comes from man-made? Of that 0.04, anybody want to answer that? Google will tell you it's around 11%. So 11% of 0.04% is produced by man-made, but that's what we're focused all of our attention on.
Okay.
That's what's caused global warming.
All right, but his point is that we are dealing with something that represents 0.04 or 0.0004% of the entire atmosphere. That is what we are concerned about. And the percentage of that very, very, very small amount that is man-made is 11%, which means, and we could move the decimal places around a little bit more if we wanted to. But the point is that it is such a small amount of our atmosphere that it is inconsequential. I mean, that it doesn't make up anything that is going to impact anything. And yet we have a whole bunch of people in the Wyoming Senate who voted down that bill. Let's continue with the cow pie just for a second. Quote, let's see here where it is. Representative Christopher Knapp raised concerns about continuing to charge customers for carbon capture evaluations that may not be economically viable. Quote, we continue to charge the end user for something that probably will not pan out in the market, Knapp said. Why not let the free market actually take care of that and get rid of the mandates? It does nothing but add cost to the end user. He is exactly right. There are a whole bunch of people in this state that are screaming that conservatives who question anything to do with nuclear energy, as you know, you're just deniers, right? You're against the free market. Well, you can't be in favor of something that is heavily subsidized, that there's only one way that you could produce any of this stuff, and that's with government money or with taxpayer dollars. It's not government money, it's your money. And then claim that that's part of the free market. It doesn't have anything to do with the free market when you're participating in an industry that is so heavily subsidized as nuclear energy, windmills, solar panels. I mean, this entire thing is just rife with contradictions, and it just makes my head want to explode.
I still want to remind, it's also the regulation. How dangerous is it in my view?
No, it's safe. It's safe.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how dangerous is the federal government.
Oh, they're safe too.
If they essentially control and regulate your primary source of power, and they all of a sudden decide, it might be better off if 4 or 5 of these states didn't have any power at all. We think there might be a problem. We're shutting things down.
Yeah,
and maybe that sounds like I don't want an elite group of people sitting in Washington, D.C., making decisions that I'm going to become dependent upon at every turn.
Yeah. Okay, now let me give you the other part of this. Now, we've had a couple of programs in a row where we're talking about the possibility of storing nuclear waste in Wyoming. I am not against nuclear energy. In fact, I'm pretty sure that it's one of the most efficient forms of energy that we can come up with. I am not in favor of storing the spent nuclear, what they are calling the spent nuclear fuel rods or the nuclear waste in Wyoming. I don't have a problem if you build a nuclear reactor here. In fact, I think that would be a grand idea. I don't want you bringing your crap back to Wyoming. That's what I don't want. Now, I understand that there are federal regulations that if you have a nuclear reactor, that you have to store the nuclear waste on site, or so the law is right now. Okay, I get that. I don't want that in Wyoming, which I guess necessarily means that I don't want your nuclear reactor here either. But I don't understand how we can start a plant that is going to manufacture these nuclear reactors in Bar None, which undoubtedly would be, a huge economic boon for Bar None. I'm absolutely in favor of that. I think that's a grand idea. What I am not in favor of is storing your crap here when it's all used up. Now, there's another piece in the Cowpie, and this one's a column by, I deleted her name. Anyway, it's a representative of Radiant Technologies. And let me just read you how she ends this piece. Quote, in addition, one can't support mining and nuclear energy and not support the entire life cycle. That's not true at all. Yes, it takes the entire life cycle of uranium to do this whole nuclear energy thing, but I can totally be against storing your highly radioactive nuclear waste in my state. And she says, but spent nuclear fuel storage included. Being pro-nuclear is being pro-spent fuel storage and pro-mine. No, that's a non sequitur. It means that just because I support part of your process means that I have to support the rest of it. That doesn't make any sense. And this is the type of logic that's being used to try to convince you to look the other way on all of the questions that you probably have.
If Wyoming were the only area to benefit, then yeah, we should store the stuff here. Use that same logic anywhere else. What they're proposing is they build these units which can be shipped anywhere.
Right.
And then whenever they need refueled, the spent fuel from wherever and waste. Whoever got the benefit, that waste comes back here. We're storing everybody's garbage here.
Yes.
If you're going to use that power in, say, New Jersey, store your own waste.
Let me give you an example here. I used to be on the board at the dump, and she makes another claim here that living next to a nuclear reactor and storage site is safer than living next to a landfill. Okay, first of all, I find that claim highly dubious. But let me just give you an example. Most landfills in Wyoming, probably the only one that does this is in Casper, but most landfills will not accept a damaged solar panel. You know why? Because the solar panel has heavy metals in it, lots of them. And if you have a damaged solar panel and you bury it in your landfill, and I mean, a landfill is a really dangerous place. You pile a whole bunch of crap in one big pile and run over it with a dozer a couple times, or a track loader or a compactor. So what happens is whatever you've got on the bottom of the pile ends up being compacted and, crunched up. And so if you have a solar panel that's buried in your heap of garbage and you run over it with a dozer, well, it's going to be cracked and damaged, and those heavy metals are going to seep into the ground. Now, the hope is that we've lined the pit, that all this garbage goes in there, and it's with this, I don't remember the thickness of this liner, but it's pretty thick. You line the pit, and you put all the garbage on top of it, and then you bury it. And the whole point is that whatever's in the garbage doesn't seep into the ground. Well, still, it's really hard to find a landfill that will take your damaged solar panel because of the heavy metals. The heavy metals don't go away. Do you know what else is a heavy metal? Uranium. Okay, so her claim that it's safer to live next to a landfill is absolute bullcrap. It is not safer. And secondly, the only data you have on your storage casks is about 40 years. So all of this is a bunch of smoke and mirrors. There's a lot of pay no attention to what the other hand is doing. And I think that conservatives who are opposed to this, you should only be, I think that you should have your questions answered. If you have questions, you should be able to give an answer. Okay, so you say that we've got 40 years of data for these storage casks. Okay, great. What happens after the 40 years? Do you have any data that says that these things are going to hold up, for 50 years, for 60 years? Do you have any data? Can you prove what you say? Can you prove to me that this stuff is not going to seep into the ground? And the answer to all of those questions right now, at least, is no, they can't. And that's why you have a whole bunch of rhetoric surrounding this, trying to convince you that spent fuel rods are not waste when they absolutely meet the definition. I mean, it really is a lot of, pay no attention to what the other hand is doing. And so, and here's the other part of this. There's a couple of op-eds. There's one on the Cowpie right now that is just, the only way you can describe it is insulting. It's by Scott Clem, and I talked about it yesterday on the program. And, they're trying to paint you, if you have questions about all this, nuclear waste storage, that you're Homer Simpson, that you're just stupid, that you just don't understand. Oh, it's safe. Pay no attention to this. Well, first, I don't think that's a very good look for you to be calling your constituents stupid. But secondly, I don't even think that it's appropriate to look at somebody that has legitimate questions and say you're just too stupid. You don't understand this. You're not smart enough. That's what they're doing, Ken.
Where else have we heard this idea, safe and effective?
What?
Safe and effective. Let's see. Where have I heard that?
I don't know. Where? Oh yeah, the vaccine. And I'm with Representative Bear. Yesterday on the show, we played that panel discussion, and he said, I don't trust the government. Why should I trust the government? Give me any good reason, one good reason. And all we have to do is say, well, you told us that a vaccine was safe and effective, and there are studies coming out now that say that hundreds, if not thousands, of people die, every month because of the jab.
If we talk about energy independence, okay, that's great for a nation. It would be good for a state. But I'm a little bit of a prepper.
Okay.
And so I think about independence. Well, when I grew up in Bighorn here, everybody had coal-fired furnaces.
Sure.
You literally could go to the mine. You could pick up coal.
Still can.
Or they'd load it for you, yeah. And it's very inexpensive. Take it back. Everybody had a coal chute in the basement. You put it in there. You were able to control your own destiny, in effect. You could take care of yourself. We get to the point where we're so reliant on technology and on federal regulators to make sure that you're going to be kept warm and that you're going to have power, etc. There are a lot of things going on. You used to be able, I bought a truck years ago that probably hadn't been started in 30 years. So I did a couple things to it, fired it right up. Same gas that had been in the tank for 30 years.
Wow.
You can't do that anymore. Gas degrades. I don't know what they've done to it. But 2 years after it sits around, if you can get anything started, I know I sound like a little bit of a out there alarmist.
You are.
But I'm alarmed.
Well, and again, there is nothing wrong with asking questions. And if those questions could be answered satisfactorily anyway, and I'm not saying that everybody is going to say, okay, yeah, I'm satisfied, we can go ahead with this. There are people, we live in a world right now where, people get convinced of, one idea or another, and there's nothing you can say that's going to convince them otherwise. And, look at the Democrat Party, for example. I mean, you can give them a list of 100 reasons why they're wrong, and they'll still not agree with you. So there are those folks, those types of folks. But, all of those questions are legitimate, and they deserve answers. And Wyoming citizens do not deserve to be told we're stupid, that we're Homer Simpson, that we're just alarmists, that we don't know what we're talking about. All of those questions are legitimate, and public officials, this gal from Radiant, Scott Clem, Senator Slithers, who voted not to repeal the CO2 ban, by the way. By the way, I don't have a list of the folks that voted that thing down. We'll try to get it through the break. I don't know if it's posted to the website yet. But my point is that you are entitled to have your questions answered. And because your public officials, some of them, are standing up saying, no, you're just too stupid, you don't understand what's going on. And let me give you one. Let's see here. Ken, go ahead and play the Beitman soundbite that the public doesn't know.
Even us legislators don't know a lot about uranium, and the public certainly doesn't. They don't know anything. So,
do you hear what he said? That's the Senate president, the president of the Wyoming Senate, saying the public doesn't know anything about this.
That's true. There are people in the public that know a vast degree, know a vast amount of that. But he also said legislators don't know much about it. And so, fair enough, we'll take that as truth. A good legislature then is going to start to ask questions and try to educate himself. If I'm going to have to make a decision about something I don't know much about, that's what I've been doing. And I'm not getting my questions answered, certainly not satisfactorily.
No.
And until I do, I'm a no.
Yeah, and I don't understand how we got to a spot. Well, I do understand. I don't get it, but we got to a spot where You don't deserve to have your questions answered. And if you ask a question, then you're just stupid. And that's what Bo Beitman was saying. That's what the op-eds in the Cow Pie from Scott Clem. If you disagree with him, you're just an idiot and you're Homer Simpson and you're just too dumb and you should just shut up and take it. Well, we've heard that from politicians way too much. So anyway, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, shocker, when you get rid of somebody who doesn't prosecute criminals, crime goes down. We'll do that when we come back. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy state politics is only going to get bigger. I've got some things up my sleeve, my friends, that I cannot wait to tell you about. Don't miss the Cowboy State Politics podcast, which is coming shortly after we finish today's program. Should be published somewhere, I don't know, 11:30-ish, something like that. Let's go ahead and take a call. A quick one anyway. And Jerry, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are y'all doing?
We're doing fantastic, man. Moving right along. What's on your mind?
Okay, one thing on Ken had mentioned the gasoline.
Yeah.
In 1984, they removed 95% of the lead from gasoline, which was there for combustion. And that might be part of the reason his gasoline's still fired. Since then, I believe all the lead's been removed. And another one on the power on this nuclear discussion. And I think the discussion needs to be continued, but it needs to be continued with moderation. 15% of the power produced in Wyoming stays in Wyoming at this time. The rest of it goes out of state.
Right.
But yet we're still paying for transmission lines, and we're still paying for maintenance. We're paying the employees' wages and benefits. It's time for the other states to step up, and not just a little bit, but 100% on anything new that comes to this state.
I absolutely agree. I mean, there's a lot of different moving parts with this whole discussion, and I honestly don't think that questions are being answered. Definitely not satisfactory, like Ken said. He's a legislator and he's got a ton of questions. In fact, the other day he told me he sat through an hour or hour and a half conference with one of the lobbyists and really didn't get hardly any of his questions answered. So I think that there's a lot of stuff we got to talk about, and again, Wyoming citizens don't deserve to be told, "Hey, you're stupid and you don't know what you're talking about. We're going to do this anyway." I mean, we got legitimate questions. They deserve answers.
Okay, and I know you're in a hurry, and I'll let you go. That's just what I needed to get off my chest. And I've been following this nuclear discussion quite a bit, and trying to get people to be calm.
Yeah.
But God bless our republic, and y'all have a great day.
All right, you too, Jerry. Thanks for the call. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number is 307-374-8989. We're going to go ahead and leave the phone lines open, even through our interview. And, it's we'll do the interview, and then maybe we'll come back to a couple of calls, and we'll see how that works out. Oh, yeah, and by the way, at the top of the hour, Shawn Meehan, Guard the Constitution, is going to join us. We're going to talk about the Convention of States. That's one of those things. Honestly, it's getting up there with my frustration about nuclear waste storage in the state. So anyway, but here's a story I found this morning that I'm dying to talk to you about. It's from the Washington Free Beacon, and it's entitled "Violent Crime Began Plummeting in Baltimore Just After Voters Fired Their Soros-Backed Prosecutor. Experts say there's not really any coincidence here." Quote, "Homicides and other types of violent crime are dropping precipitously in the crime-ridden city of Baltimore. It started shortly after voters fired their progressive Soros-backed prosecutor in 2022, and experts say there's no coincidence. Baltimore's homicide rate soared after state's attorney Marilyn Mosby took office in 2015 on a progressive platform of refusing to prosecute low-level crimes while aggressively charging police officers, including those involved in the death of Freddie Gray, a black man who died from injuries sustained while in custody. Those officers were ultimately acquitted, but Mosby's policies still had a chilling effect on the Baltimore Police Department. Arrests plummeted under Mosby's watch as homicides jumped from an average of 229 per year before she took office to 333 per year during her 8 years as state's attorney. By July of 2022, voters had had enough, and they kicked her out of office. In 2022, that's Mosby's last year, Baltimore saw 334 homicides across the city. The next year, under Bates's watch, or the new attorney general, that number dropped down to 262. In 2024, it dropped further to 2002. And during the first half of 2025, they've seen 68 homicides, a 62% drop in the same time frame. Quote, "The numbers don't lie," Maryland Public Policy Institute fellow Sean Kennedy told the Washington Free Beacon. Ivan Bates's model of targeting the most violent and violence-prone offenders, gun-carrying criminals, is the primary driver of Baltimore's miraculous success. Now, this is a lot of, and Agent 29 and I talk about this a lot on the program, that if you prosecute criminals, others will be deterred from committing the same act. Like, deterrence is a real thing. I know if you talk to a lot of these libs, commie pinkos on the left who are anti-cop and anti-prosecutor, they'll tell you, well, deterrence doesn't really work. We need more social workers, which is the narrative that we're hearing out of Mamdani in New York. He's definitely a defund the police guy. But the proof is in the pudding, my friends. You prosecute crime, crime goes down.
I think there's another aspect that, even if there are mental health issues, and there are. If someone is a danger to society, we put them into a prison, we're protecting society from that danger. That's a hard thing to say. I know, Justice Fox was talking about how expensive it is to do so. How expensive is it if he goes out and does whatever it is that he does repeatedly? Not everything is a matter of dollars and cents. Believe it or not, somebody on appropriations said that.
Weird. Well, but I think that you raise probably one of the most important points in this entire thing, is that it is not just the the cost of prosecuting a criminal. Yeah, there's a cost associated with everything, but it's all the other ancillary costs that come along with it. Somebody breaks into your house and takes your stuff. Okay, it costs you money, but think about all the other things. And Baltimore is a perfect example. When you have homicides drop from the 200 to 300 range down to 68, it's much cheaper to keep your house nice and up to date and do all the maintenance than it is to replace your entire house. I think we've heard Ken say that before. He's a big pro, preventative maintenance type of guy, and I think everybody should be. And the same holds true with prosecutors. And just last night, the lovely Christine and I were talking about why is it that we're seeing so many more shootings? And I'm not saying these two are correlative. What I'm saying is when you see a rise in violent or criminal activity, there's a cause behind it. And a lot of times it happens to be that you're not prosecuting criminals enough. You can pick up probably just about any newspaper in the state, and you'll see examples in the police blotter or in the court blotter where somebody who was previously convicted of a crime, they were given probation. We talked about this with Kate Fox, and the truth is, if you just prosecute criminals, crime will go down. And I think that stretches into just enforce the laws that we have. I mean, we have laws on the books. Let's enforce them. And you notice from the piece, they said, well, one of those things is arresting criminals who carrying guns. We have a law against that.
Yeah, I agree. Follow the laws that we have, stand behind those. And understand that those laws are there. It's the job of government to protect individual liberty, to protect people. And I just want to go back and repeat something that I said a little bit ago. Even if there is a mental issue, okay, somehow we need to address that, and the prison system that we have set up now perhaps needs to be amended. But we need to protect society. And too often we take people with dangerous tendencies and say, well, prison isn't the place for them. Let's kick them right back out there. My son-in-law.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, my son-in-law worked at the boys' school in Worland for several years. And the biggest problem they had there was they didn't have the wherewithal to properly deal with the people that are there. Okay, that's what we've got to fix. But by the same token, we shouldn't just say, oh, they've got a mental problem, so let's just kick them back out into society.
No, it's stupid. I mean, if you're a criminal, you deserve to be thrown in jail. I mean, we've got to get back to prosecuting people who break our laws, which includes politicians, by the way. There are lots of those. And, there's a lot of stuff that's been coming out about, the financial interests of some people in elected office as it relates to all this nuclear stuff. And, we need to take a hard look at it. And if people break our laws, prosecute them. I mean, it's not that hard. Just follow the law, dang it. A good example of that is this whole Russiagate thing. And I don't really want to get too far into it. But you had people at the top who were not following the laws. They're fabricating evidence. They're trying to essentially conduct a coup on the sitting U.S. president. And, they're still after it, though. I think they're kind of on the back end of this. And let me give you an example. There's a piece in the Daily Caller. Obama-appointed judge accused of fabricating quotes wholesale. All right. So essentially what happened is in this judge's opinions, it was found out that he was misattributing quotations. He was giving legal opinions that don't necessarily pan out. And it kind of sounds like maybe he was using AI to write his legal opinions. This is from the Daily Caller. Quote, to typo is human. To falsely attribute quotes in a legal opinion is what's alleged to U.S. District Court Judge Julian Niels. Niels delivered an opinion on, and I've got a picture of him here, not that we really want to see him, but let's see here, slideshow. Okay. That's Julian Niels there. Niels delivered an opinion June 30th, 2025, which caught the eye of attorney Andrew Lichtman. Lichtman had appeared before Niels on behalf of defendants in a recent civil suit. Lichtman issued a letter to the judge bringing to the court's attention a series of errors in the opinion, including 3 instances in which the outcomes of cases cited in the opinion were misstated. In other words, the motions to dismiss were granted, not denied, and numerous instances in which quotes were mistakenly attributed to decisions that do not contain such quotations. Lichtman alleged six mistakes contained in the opinion. He lists several quotes, which he claims Neil attributed to cases in which they don't appear. No need to take Lichtman's word for it. Simply Control F. Neil's opinion cites City of Warwick retirement system v. Caltalent. The absence of insider trading is not dispositive. No such quotation appears in the reference document. Lichtman also claimed that Neil's opinion, quote, attributes two quotes to defendants that they never made. That opinion and order were entered in error, reads a notice posted by the court to the case docket. Bloomberg reported that, quote, a subsequent opinion and order will follow. So if we have judges, even judges, that aren't following the law, how can we expect that your run-of-the-mill, everyday criminal is going to follow the law? They're not going to. And I mean, that's just common sense. I mean, we're living in a world here where you have judges who were appointed who arguably don't deserve to be there. And secondly, aren't qualified to be there. And third, aren't doing their job anyway. And, they just go to AI and say, type me an opinion on this case. And I can tell you for a fact, my friends, I went to AI the other day, ChatGPT, and I said, please review David Iverson on Cowboy state politics. And it told me that I had been in journalism since 1986. Now, I remember 1986, but I was pretty young. I was only like 8 years old, and I'm pretty sure I wasn't doing any journalism. I mean, maybe I tried to play journalist or reporter or detective or something, but certainly wasn't doing journalism in 1986.
Well, I was.
Yes, clearly you were.
Mostly just consuming. I was just sitting here thinking about what has happened since you actually did get into journalism.
Yeah.
From the time when you just Googled, what's a podcast? And then you got your big break. You got to interview Gail Simmons.
Yeah, that wasn't a big break.
And it was broken. Things have gone on in such a way for both of us that, to me, the hand of God has to be in it. And I wanted to take a minute and say that and thank him for allowing us the time, the wherewithal to be able to put us in this situation. And beyond that, to thank you folks, the listeners.
Yeah.
Your listeners have embraced me. I get all kinds of messages back. I go to different places and people come up and want to shake my hand. It's kind of weird.
You get used to it. And my favorite thing is when I'm, out somewhere with the lovely Christine, and somebody will, come up to me and say, "Hey, I know that voice," and I mean, it just really turns my crank, puts a smile on my face. But you're absolutely right, Ken, that a lot of the things that have happened are absolute God things, and you're put in a place where, you're just, you're supposed to be there. And just things start happening for you. And the success of this program is, I think, a perfect example of that. I have a friend who he's not necessarily the church-going type or the believing type. And he says, well, man, you captured lightning in a bottle. And I say, well, I think that it's more of a God thing, that he's allowed me to do this, given me the resources to do it. And certainly, pointed you, my adored listener, in the right direction, say, hey, maybe you ought to listen to this guy. And I'm eternally grateful. Well, let's see here. We've got about 10 minutes before we're going to talk to Shawn. What else I got here? You know what we haven't talked about? Trump's trade deals that he's been putting together. Absolutely incredible. When he was at Turnberry at his castle isn't it awesome that our president has a castle? Anyway, I mean, don't take that to mean I think he ought to be a monarch. I just think it's cool that he owns his own castle. But anyway, he's been striking trade deals with countries where America gets everything, and the other folks, well, they're paying the price. And here's one, France. So they blasted the U.S.-EU trade agreement as an act of submission to the Trump administration. Well, France would know if it was an act of submission or not, because that's what they do all the time. I mean, you want to know why you should always buy a firearm manufactured in France? Do you know why, Ken?
They probably have never been used.
Well, correct. It's only been dropped once, and it's never been fired. I mean,
you know why they planted trees along all the streets in France?
No.
So that enemy soldiers would have some shade.
That's right. Exactly right. And to quote, one of my I don't want to say idol, but one of the guys I look up to, France sucks, generally speaking. The agreement means that there will be a 15% tariff on all European imports in exchange for $600 billion in investments in the U.S. and $750 billion purchases of U.S. energy. French Prime Minister François Bayrou on Monday denounced the United States and the European Union's recent trade agreement as an act of submission on part of the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Maybe she should just be better at negotiating. You're going up against Donald Trump, and I just one question for you, ladies and gentlemen. Are you tired of winning? I mean, really? Have you had enough winning that you want to go back to Joe Biden?
I guess one of the things that I like about it is when Trump first started tariffs, that's his primary weapon is a tariff. And everybody just talks about all the horror.
Destroy the economy.
All the horror. What all the horrible things are going to be happening because he's going out there like a king and wielding his wand and a tariff on you and a tariff on you and two more on you.
You get a tariff. You get a tariff. You get a tariff.
They don't understand the art of the deal and how Trump works. And once you figure it out, those opening bargain chips, that's just the opening bid.
Yeah. And it's, you got to read the art of the deal. And you would think that all of these countries would figure it out, that you always ask for more than what you actually want. And sometimes you win big and you get everything that you want. And, other times you negotiate back down to what you'll accept. And it's, my friends, it is amazing to live in a country where there's so much winning going on. And if you compare the last 4 years to what's happening right now, it is a 180-degree difference. We went from being, last in line in a lot of places to now being the place where everybody wants to do business. And I've got another piece somewhere in the stack of stuff that says, it is very clear. It's from Axios, actually, that it's very clear that businesses have to operate in the United States. Even if you're a foreign company, you have to participate in American markets because that's where all the cash is, and that's where all we American consumers are. And it's just it's amazing to be winning. And I can't tell you how tickled I am to hear France whine about it. Oh, it's an act of submission. Well, only you would know that, Mr. Unfired Firearm. Let's see here. What else we got here? Let me just. Oh, here it is. Here's that piece I was talking about. Let me pull it here. From Axios. Trump trade deals prove access to the U.S. still matters above all else. Now, who is Axios? They are a decidedly left-wing publication. I mean, they are very, very much anti-Trump. And here they are saying, well, all these trade deals are kind of proving that you got to be in America. Here's what it says. And this is the outfit that lays it out pretty insultingly, if you ask me. Why it matters, the big picture. And they try to break it down for you in a pretty insulting way. But it says, in the Trump-dominated global economy, the U.S. gets plenty but gives nothing in return. And I'm assuming that they mean this in kind of an insult, but it continues. This is the reality of the asymmetric trade deals touted by the White House, which shows how far foreign leaders will go to safeguard access to the U.S. market. Trump announced agreements with Europe and Japan in which both agreed to drop their tariff rates to zero. Promising eye-popping investments in the U.S. and agreed to drop their tariff rates. In return, those countries get some assurance on their tariff rate. And let's hear what they're saying. Both Tokyo and Brussels apparently viewed the price of the 15% tariff worth paying in light of alternative higher tariffs, uncertainty, and counter-retaliation. Wendy Cutler, former acting U.S. trade representative under Obama, said. So the point here is they're accepting a lower tariff so that they don't have to put up with big, gigantic tariffs. Well, that's a negotiating tactic. And trade says, hey, Trump says, you take 15%, or the tariff's going to be 25. I mean, pick your poison. And I guess the other alternative that they could choose is, we're not going to trade with you at all. But you know what? It is absolutely necessary if you're in business that you have some interest in America. Quote, Trump announced the U.S.-EU deal on Sunday afternoon in Scotland, mere days before the White House was set to impose 30% levies on all European goods. European Commission Chairman Ursula said the deal would bring the stability and predictability that global businesses need. Von der Leyen did not say what the U.S. conceded in the agreement when asked by a reporter. Quote, I think we hit exactly the point we wanted to find. Rebalanced but enable trade on both sides. So the folks in the EU, they're taking this as a big win. They're saying, hey, we think this is great for us, only paying a 15% tariff. And I mean, that just shows you how good of a negotiator Donald Trump is. And it's, my friends, it's incredible to live in a country where there's so much winning going on, both economically, militarily, our influence in the global marketplace, in the globe. I mean, how many peace treaties has Donald Trump struck, or ceasefires or whatever? There was just one announced yesterday. Cambodia and Thailand, I think. They've got a ceasefire that's still holding. In fact, I think that one was released yesterday. But anyway, their ceasefire is still holding, and I think that probably makes like 5. I mean, at some point we're probably going to lose count on how many people decided to stop fighting. But it's absolutely incredible, and I'm thrilled to live in a world where that's happening. Let's see here. What else we've got to go here? Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk to Shawn Meehan of Guard the Constitution. I've been looking forward to this interview for a while. We'll talk a little Convention of States. So we'll take a break, and we'll do that when we come back.
Since gold backing was removed from the dollar, the value has dropped significantly over the past few decades. Experts say this is one of the main reasons goods are more expensive and your savings are worth less each year. How would you know how many dollars to save for retirement if the valuation of the dollar changes over time? Would you work all week for that $20 gold piece? Let's look at the valuation of this coin from the 1970s to today. When President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, this coin traded for about $275. Today, it trades for about $14,000. Buying and holding rare coins using only a fraction of your portfolio is our suggested way to save for the future. Call U.S. Coin Capital at 1-800-878-2646 to get your free United States gold and silver buyer's guide.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Welcome to Lessons in Civility by Morton Buildings. Gentlemen, is your garage completely jam-packed full of all of your unnecessary crap, and your lovely wife has been on your tail, nagging you non-stop to clean it out? It's not because she just wants to incessantly irritate you. Chivalry dictates that you should clear out a space so she can park her car inside and you don't end up sleeping on the couch anymore. To do that, contact Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Not only are they the experts in metal building construction, they're also skilled at keeping you out of the doghouse. One more time. Their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. This has been Lessons in Civility from Morton Buildings. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. You know, Ken, it's almost like I'm omnipresent. And you can find Cowboy State Politics pretty much everywhere. So, you know, if you go to YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, you can watch the show. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast pretty much anywhere. You know, it's really easy, and you don't want to miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. So I'm joined on the program now by a guy I've been wanting to talk to for a really long time, Shawn Meehan. Shawn, welcome to Cowboy State Politics.
Good morning, David. Good to be with you.
Yeah, man, we've been trying to set this up for a long time. I'm glad we actually got it done.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to doing it myself.
All right. First question everybody gets on my show is, why don't you take a minute or two and just tell my audience about yourself?
Basically, I live near Reno, Nevada, born and raised in Santa Barbara, California. Went on active duty with the Air Force in 1986. Proudly served 20 years and 14 days. I was a fuel specialist and became an aircraft loadmaster on C-141s and C-5s. Excuse me, been to 54 countries around the world, learning quite a bit. After I retired in 2006, settled here in Nevada, and in about 12 years ago, was asked in my Douglas County Republican Central Committee to debate on this Convention of States issue. Knew nothing about it, but they like to go in and find people that are known in the organization and beat them down to get credibility. I learned a lot about it, and I don't think they liked that debate. And for some reason, I feel that this is my passionate way to continue the oath of enlistment that I took back in 1986. So that's what I do now, is educate, lobby state legislators around the entire country on the truth of the Article 5 convention.
Well, and that's a big thing here. You know, in Wyoming, we've been pretty successful at voting down that bill, and it comes up every session. And, you know, in some cases, when the liberal redcoats were in charge, they tried it a couple different ways. They tried to slip it in the budget too. But it is such a seductive idea that, you know, a lot of people are in favor of it when they really don't quite understand it, because they've been listening to the propaganda that comes from the marketing organization, which is called Convention of States Action. And, you know, there's a lot of ways that we could talk about this, but I thought where we'd start is I just to ask you. So, you know a whole bunch about the Convention of States, or the Article 5 Convention. Why are you against it? Just give me your top couple of arguments, and then we'll talk about it.
Well, back to where I was challenged to debate it, I initially first heard about it, and I thought, this is an amazing idea. And this is one of their taglines: use the Constitution to save the Constitution. And then, like all good patriots should do, but we don't, I looked at the other side. And I started looking for negative things, positive things, all angles. And what I found is these people simply do not tell the truth. There's many good people that, except for this issue, fellow patriots, I would fight with along with them for everything that they believe in. This was not put in the Constitution for the reason that they say. We have laws and precedent in history that prove that this could be a huge problem and that it won't work. And everybody says, well, let's go ahead and try everything. Okay, yeah. In politics, I get it. You need to try a lot of things. But the problem is with this, they are one of the largest grassroots organizations as far as their email list, things like that. They block out the sun from actual, real, proven solutions. They suck up the money and the effort of the patriots. And there's solutions that have been tested in various states. And that's one of the things I work on, is modifying and improving them with the education, and then using the activism that we can put the government back in the box that it came in. You know, interestingly enough,
you trace your involvement in this back to a debate that you had. And what was it, a year and a half ago? I can't remember. It's been a while. The Republican women here in Sheridan County in Wyoming said that they wanted to hold a debate about the Convention of States, and they invited the guy who is now the president of the Wyoming Senate. His name is Dennis Beitman. Everybody calls him Bo, but his real name is Dennis. If my name was Dennis too, I'd probably want to change it. But you know, he and one of the folks from Convention of States Action debated. And on my side, I had me and my friend Leah Southwell from the John Birch Society. And, the John Birch Society, they get a lot of flack. It's all, in my opinion, it's all undeserved. But anyway, I walked into the room and I had a stack of books about this high. And I saw Dennis Beitman's face. And he knew when I walked in that he was wholly unprepared for that debate. And it was, again, it was just me asking questions. So, tell me what the purpose of Article 5 is. And, it's their whole spiel. Oh, it's to save the Constitution. So, Shawn, what is the purpose behind Article 5?
Well, the purpose of the broad Article 5 is it defines how we amend our United States Constitution. The part that we're focusing on this morning, David, is the Article 5 Convention. And if you know much about I know you as a historian do, but your viewers, if they know much about the Constitutional Convention in 1787 in Philadelphia, towards the end, 3 days before the end, on September 15th, George Mason did in fact stand up and say something to the effect of, hey, we've got a problem, but the states don't have the ability to amend this. The Convention of States people, Mark Meckler specifically, has this very clever, deceptively lawyerly worded spiel where he continues to say, and therefore we will not be able to rein in the tyranny of the government. That's ridiculous on legal, logical, so many levels. What it's there for, and George Mason, ironically, the same George Mason, at the very start of the convention said, June 11th, 1787, that amendments specifically remedy defects. Us not following the United States Constitution is not a defect in the Constitution. It's a defect in we the people.
Exactly. And, I constantly tell people, when I'm at the legislative session, look, we don't have a problem with the Constitution. If we just follow it, everything's going to be great. The problem we have is with politicians who don't follow the Constitution. And Shawn, I want to introduce you to my producer, Agent 29, who also happens to be a state representative. Ken?
Hi, Shawn. Glad to hear you be here on the show, and we'll talk later about some other opportunities perhaps for you to work with the legislators here. I happen to be firmly in that same camp. I got up on the House floor just this last session, and I talked about if you're going to be a good mechanic, you have to be able to diagnose the problem. Otherwise, you're just changing parts and flailing. And I think that's part of what it comes down to. They've seen the problems, and they think, okay, we're just going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And essentially, that's never going to work. So thanks for all that you're doing, and I'm sure that you and I will be back in touch.
You mentioned probably the principal problem with Convention of States Action, and that's that they don't tell the truth. Now, I want to talk to you about how that they structure their resolutions. To get this thing going, every state legislature has to approve a resolution to ask to join the Article 5 convention. And I've got one of my favorite sound bites is from Mark Meckler. And in this one, he's asked, why did you set up the resolution the way that you did? Ken, go ahead and play that Mark Meckler soundbite.
So if there's no risk, then why did you put limitations on the enabling and educate the three basic limitations in the laws that you're
so as opposed to doing a general convention?
Correct.
Yeah. So the reason is for narrative. In other words, if we were to put out there to the world that, hey, we're just going to have a convention, we have no idea what we're going to talk about at this convention, then frankly, nobody would support it because there'd be so much fear out there. Everybody would be afraid that we had to frame it in a way. I mean, this is one of the things that I think, I'm just going to say this generally, libertarians and conservatives are really bad at narrative. We just generally don't understand narrative. And if you don't frame a political discussion in the correct way, you lose.
All right, so there he is saying the reason why the Convention of States Action just doesn't say we're going to have a convention and do whatever we want is that nobody would buy it. So the question for you, Shawn, is in all of the Convention of States, Article 5 convention resolutions, they have a list of the things that they want to do. Why do they do that? Can you explain the process? Can you explain what's happening? And then we'll talk about the narrative part.
Well, David, first I want to thank Ken for jumping in. Look forward to hearing from him later. And I would be remiss if I did not thank you for mentioning the name of my friend Leah. Leah does the work of 10 people, and I'm sure you're well aware of that. And I keep in touch with her, and I've learned much from her, and I'm proud to be part of their network. And I'm honored that my friends at the JBS, who I'm not a member of, still honor me by letting me work with them. They're great people. Back to your question. It is to narrative, I think, a lot of what they say. I don't know what's in Mark Meckler's head, if he believes what he thinks he's saying, or if they think these restrictions are important or not. But what I do know from interacting with legislators is that these delegate binding bills or things that are written in the resolutions are extremely important to them, and they're persuasive. With current litigation that I'm part of right now, I'm learning a lot about how people in the law, it's how it's written and how it should work versus the historical precedent of reality. And oh, by the way, other laws that are applicable to what you're doing that you're purposely making sure I don't look at. There's never any one thing. I mean, if you want to make money, you go to law school, sell your soul, and you'll always have work. You just won't have any morality.
No, you're exactly right. And, there was a committee meeting that, and I try to testify whenever this stupid thing comes up at the legislature. But in one of them, the bill's sponsor says, well, yeah, we want to balance the budget. We want to have term limits, and we want to rein in federal power. And, okay, so the term limits one, that's pretty self-explanatory. It's totally unconstitutional. But, yeah, we get that one. The balance the budget one, that's the one I think that most people find more seductive than anything. In your opinion, why would that be a bad thing?
Well, to the term limits, the founders talked quite a bit about this in the Federalist Papers, and they specifically talk about, and I'm going to paraphrase, but basically They talk about freshman legislators who will be ensnared by the traps that are laid for them. Everybody says that it was never meant to be a lifetime occupation. Broadly, I get that, and I don't want it to be, but people need to stop quoting things that aren't quotes. Show me the founder that specifically said that. There are problems not having your seasoned legislators around and constantly. So actually, over a period of time, Meckler and his people, by us pushing against that, have said, well, it's not just the legislators, but the staff that would also be term limited. That's even worse, because the only people that are going to be there forever are the paid lobbyists. You literally empower, they write the bills, they decide what's going to have the hearings on the floors. The legislators are effectively the figureheads. I mean, they do have power, and we know that, and like Ken would, I'm sure, share with us, they can get involved and they can run the show to a level of assertiveness that they choose. Now, having said that, going to the balanced budget amendment, Article 1, Section 8 of the current Constitution in effect is a balanced budget amendment. They are only allowed to do what they're allowed to do, the enumerated powers. And there have been professional level studies done that if you did that, it would be a 70% or more reduction in the federal budget. Now, I have to say to the people that are freaking out right now, you need to listen to that whole story. Your state on its own may choose to implement fees or taxes in your state for programs at the federal level that went away that your people together desire to continue. That's called states' rights. God bless you, do that. But the federal government does not need to be doing that. We need to just do what's authorized, which means you can only spend money on what's authorized. If you come back to a balanced budget, what you're doing is you're prioritizing accounting figures. We're not going to spend this, we're not going to do that, versus the enumerated powers and what the founders intended for us. And we know that there's nothing like eternal life for a government, nothing unlike a government program for eternal life. They won't go away, they won't cut. And back in the 2000s, when the stock market was raging, people were making money, a lot of tax revenue is what I'm getting at there. There were 26 states out of the 48 that are required to have balanced budgets by their state constitution or legislation that did not have a balanced budget. And since the 70s, we've been under multiple declarations of emergency in the United States, many of them unconstitutional. but they would fall under all the draft balanced budget amendments that I've ever seen. So it, again, sucks up this life, blocks out the sun, the time and effort of patriots that properly directed absolutely could put Congress back in the box they came in.
And this is a hard one for a lot of people because you know, if you don't study this thing, you're going to hear the words balanced budget and you immediately think, hey, that would be a good thing, right? You're only spending so much as you're taking in. You know, in your own personal finances, you know, if you spend more than you're bringing in, that's called debt. And eventually the credit card runs out and you're not going to get another credit card. Government, it doesn't work that way. The federal government, they can just print money, which is kind of it's not kind of, it's a lot of what was happening during the Biden administration. But I often ask legislators who say, well, we have to have a balanced budget. And I have two comments. One, your state should, yes, we in Wyoming and you in Nevada, yep, you should have a balanced budget. Absolutely. But the federal government, if you do that, that's a license to tax. There is only one type of government that has a balanced budget, and it's called a communist government. In that whatever you want to spend, you just take from the people. And here's how it would work here. You pass a balanced budget amendment. You can only spend what you bring in. Well, there's this big project we want to do, a high-speed rail from San Francisco to Los Angeles. Well, this is a great idea. We got to have the cash. So what do? You tax. And because you have to have a balanced budget, whatever you spend, you have to bring in. And so it actually works in reverse. And it's, a lot of these arguments that Convention of States Action uses are so, they're kind of tricky. For example, the balanced budget one, right? It sounds good on face, but in the end, it's actually the reverse. Now, the other one, like the rein in federal power. Okay. My answer to that one is always, all right, what does that mean? I mean, you're passing a resolution. You're saying you're going to rein in federal power. What does that mean when you get to the convention? And this, I think, is one of the points that Mark Meckler and Convention of States Action, Rick Santorum, who, by the way, chickened out when I offered to debate him. He agreed to it and then, ghosted me. Weird. Maybe he listened to a program or two. But let me just ask you, Shawn, if this convention were to actually take place, give us a sense of what would actually be happening. I mean, how the thing would work, what's actually going to happen, regardless of what Mark Meckler and pals say.
Well, to where you were going with this, the broadly rein in the government, the third part of their resolutions, that in no way does that say shrink it. And in fact, at one of their first simulated conventions, they passed a resolution talking about empowering the executive to pass laws. I don't think they knew what they were doing, but those are the kind of stupid mistakes that can happen. And they say bad amendments will never pass. That won't be a problem. But ironically, two of the amendments that they specifically want to get rid of are the 16th and 17th. Now, we could probably do a whole show on the good and bad of all of that. But the fact is, those amendments passed and were ratified. There you go. And also the 18th for prohibition that a mere 10 roughly years later had to be repealed by the 21st because, no matter what you think about the drinking issue, you put that in the Constitution, really, that was just dumb. Having said that, how would a convention go? I'm sure you've been to your Republican state convention in Wyoming. I was a committee chair for several years for our resolutions committee in Nevada at our state convention. And immediately the Convention of States people will recoil. Oh, this is different. No, it's not.
Right.
A convention's a convention. A convention effectively becomes a sovereign fourth branch of government while it exists. It forms its own rules. It decides whether or not its own rules are being obeyed. And there are Supreme Court opinions that effectively say that it's non-justiciable. And meaning that you can't run it to the courts what comes out of there. And in fact, in the 1800s, there was a state constitutional convention in Pennsylvania that was incredibly instructive. It's in Constitutional Brinkmanship by Russell Kaplan, a law professor. And this is one of the arguments we make that's incredibly powerful. is they had a specific charge to amend their state constitution. They went in and they did much, much more.
Oh, yeah.
They quickly came through. They rushed it through ratification. It was in the courts, and the courts did what courts love to do. They said it is moot because it is already ratified by the people. So many things could happen. And the one that we like to talk about, the Convention of States is most dishonest about, is the 1787 convention and what happened. I'll briefly state, and you can decide if we want to go deeper, is those states, only 12 attended. Rhode Island did not attend, but they sent their objections, and they were good concerns. And by the way, history's borne out that they were correct. Having said that, those 12 states or colonies at that convention gave specific instructions to their delegates. 11 of the 12, they were very, very clear along the lines of, you have all, and Meckler loves to read the first part of their delegate commissions and ignore the second. The first part, essentially, they read very similar. Yes, you have the right to address the exigencies and problems. There was water navigation issues back in the day and commerce issues between the states. We were not a country. We were forming we were a confederation, and we had issues that needed legitimately to be addressed, and they should have been addressed. Having said that, you read down further, it basically said anything that comes out of here needs to be ratified by the Continental Congress and all 13 states to be effective. Well, if you open your pocket constitutions, ladies and gentlemen, and look at Article 7, the then draft constitution that is now our in effect constitution only required 9 states to put it into effect.
Yep.
So you can use whatever modern newspeak words you want, but when I say the Constitution ran away, that's what I mean. They produced a product that violated the very powers they were given. Now, the COS action people will say, that's insulting to the founders.
Yeah.
And, they go to the emotion, right? That's insulting to the founders. You hate the Constitution. How dare you claim you're a patriot and teach the Constitution? Oh, let me continue. Federalist 49 specifically says that the people are the fountain of all power. Even though they exceeded their authority and sent that draft constitution to the states without Congress approving it, and they lie about that like crazy. Got the resolution to show you. The conventions of the people, the founders knew what they were doing. Conventions of the people in the states ratified that new constitution. So they exceeded their authority, produced a draft document that actually was properly ratified. And then they say, well, what's your problem? And I say, fair question. Let's do that again. Now what's going to get through? Are gay rights going to be in the Constitution? Is a Second Amendment? And by the way, they're not going to take the Second Amendment out, but they're just going to chop it up.
Yep.
And it's not going to be the Second Amendment anymore. I've talked to lawyers that said, you move a comma around.
Yep.
Or change one word in that, and those of us that understand the real reason for firearms and our individual rights, we're going to lose those rights. So, and then I just boil it down to all of this drama and trauma, because they've basically said for years, we should have been done out of, and whatever their changes were going to be should have been ratified way back from when they started this in 2011, 2012. It's a crisis. It's a nightmare. It's an emergency. Well, I think we've learned they've got all the low-hanging fruit. They've got their 19 states. They're not telling the truth about what went on in Kansas with that resolution. We can get into that later. But long story short, what we've got right now, if we followed it, is unbelievably amazing and would greatly improve this country.
Well, I think that you're exactly right. And I think that one of the biggest problems with the convention is that you pointed out is that you have no idea what will come out of it. And in fact, that's what Justice Scalia said. That's the famous soundbite, which another one that I should have prepped for today, the one where he says, whoa, you never know what's going to come out of that thing. And, with legislators, I often say, okay, so you know how much money floats around a legislature, whether it's dinners or it's campaign donations or it's, all sorts of graft. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of money that floats around state legislatures and certainly Congress. Weird. Nancy Pelosi's portfolio outperformed every hedge fund in the last 5 years. I wonder how that happened. And so if you think that there's a lot of money that is being used to influence politicians now, can you just imagine the amount of money that's going to float around when the United States says, hey, we're going to monkey around with the Constitution? It is going to be absolutely mind-blowing.
Just had one thing I wanted to interject here. Kind of goes back to the term limits thing. You have seen, we see lame duck governors and how they react and the way that they change. Can you imagine if half of the legislature each time knew this was their last shot?
Oh, boy.
They didn't have to answer to the people anymore.
I've actually got a practical example, Ken. Back in 2014, in my state of Nevada, we had a ballot initiative that ended up now being our commerce tax or gross receipts tax. And by the way, in 27, when I settled in Nevada, it was low tax, all that kind of stuff. And I was telling David, I'm going to get up there to Sheridan and investigating becoming a Wyoming resident at some point, perhaps, because you guys are the last vestiges of freedom left. Having said that, Nevada was really a good place for all this. All of a sudden, we have this, and it was, gosh, what was it? 83% of all voters of all parties disapproved this in that November. In our next state legislature, that only months later in January 2015 came, Republicans, we took over. First time in 30 years, we had the legislature. And it was because Democrats stayed home. It wasn't because we were that wonderful. Having said that, we got in there, and then we had a, quote, Republican governor. Oh, geez. And
his name isn't Mark Gordon, is it?
No, this was Brian Sandoval. And we had term-limited state legislature. So Republicans, first time in 30 years, get in. What do you think they're going to do? Hopefully do sort of Republican things, follow the party platform. Nobody's perfect. That's fair. We're human. I'll give them that. But at least try. They passed the largest single tax increase in the history of my state that mirrored what the people only months before had disapproved. And this, quote, Republican light governor signed it. And it has blown up. Only now, 10 years later, in Republican politics in Nevada, are we able to get past that and the memories and start getting people to trust things that we're trying to do again. Unbelievably destructive to legislation, to relationships, to morality, to belief, to faith in the system.
Yeah, and I think that and a point that I often make is that the very first thing that any group, deliberative body, whether it's your city council or county commissioner or the state legislature or the U.S. Congress, when there's a new Congress, the very first thing they do is pass the rules. And, Wyoming is a good example of what rules can be passed. There's a rule on the floor of the House that if you need a spittoon, all you have to do is demand a spittoon. It's in the rules. Okay, kind of stupid, but it's a vestige of, years gone by, but it's still in there. There's a rule that the gentlemen have to wear a tie. And they thought at one time, well, you know what, this is kind of cumbersome. And so they changed that to where you could wear a bolo tie, which I get is kind of Wyoming, but still, it's in the rules. And though it sounds kind of facetious, if they passed a rule that said everybody's got to wear pink shoes, well, they could do that. And so when we talk about a convention of states, the very first thing they're going to do is pass the rules. And they could very well say, you know what, everything we passed before, we're not going to follow it. We're going to do our own thing. Ken?
I just think we need to change the rule to allow dress denim.
Dress denim? No, I don't think so. You have to wear a suit, my friend.
Yeah, a suit with nice denim slacks.
No, negative. Shawn?
I think you're 100% right on the rules. And I did this last session watch a few videos of your legislature, and I do like the broad attitude. In Northern Nevada here, I like to do what we call Northern Nevada casual. It's the jeans with the blue blazer, polo shirt, no tie. I'll wear a tie if I'm ever absolutely forced to, but even lobbying legislators, I try not to wear a tie now. But Yeah, the rules are, in generally the rules that a convention makes within itself, we have to be honest, they generally are followed. But what are those rules is the problem.
Exactly
and
right.
who makes them and for what motivation and under payment of what from whom.
Right, exactly right. All right, you got time to stay through the break?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Shawn Meehan. There's a lot to talk about with the Convention of States, and we want to make sure that while we've got him, we cover most of it. So we'll do that when we come back. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by God himself. I so miss Rush Limbaugh. You know, I often go back and watch some of the old episodes, and I just can't help myself. But, you know, it's like Glenn Beck says, if you steal something from him, you've probably stolen it twice. So anyway, welcome back to the program. We're joined by Shawn Meehan. He is here to talk about the Convention of States. And I think that one of the things that we often gloss over, and we kind of mentioned it before the break, is all of the money that flows around this entire subject. And it's not just from, you know, lobbyists or, you know, legislators doing their insider trading, which we all know that they absolutely do. It's through paid influence. And some of the, and you know, Shawn, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I occasionally get on social media and I like to needle some of these Convention of States. I call them the zombies. I know, kind of pejorative, but really they kind of act like zombies. And I pointed out, you know, the post was one of their pictures of all these people that support it. And Rick Santorum was there in the picture, and Mark Levin was there. And I just put a comment on there. Maybe you should be honest and say how much you've paid these folks. And you would not believe, well, maybe you would, the backlash that I got. And it was produce the documents. And then when I did produce the tax returns or the 1099s, weird, they didn't want to talk about it anymore. But the truth is that there's a crap load of money that's floating around all of this.
Absolutely. And I've actually for years been tracking their IRS Form 990s.
990s, that's what it is.
Since early 2012. And the money, not to broaden out your question too much, but their money is a subcomponent of their entirely dishonest process. I've never seen a political group push their snake oil in such a deceptive fashion that also by those that aren't in the know, looks to be a really good way to save the country. It's really sad. There is so much to unpack. We'd have to do an 8-hour show, but some of the quick stuff is in the state of Montana twice, they've been officially accused by their election regulator people of improper filings for postcards they put slandering candidates. I know in Idaho, they financed 3 primary challengers. The challengers were what you and I might call rhino Republicans, challenging their conservatives, because honest conservative Republicans are against convention of states. They know it. They don't let learned people discuss. I ran into Rick Santorum in the restroom before testimony at an Idaho hearing.
Oh, isn't he just lovely?
His eyes popped out because he knows exactly who I am. And there was a bunch of maneuvering done that, oh, well, you're not in the state of Nevada, or you're from Nevada, you can't testify here. We're all about states' rights. Why is Rick Santorum testifying then? And then Rick Santorum tells me, on the radio up there, I'm challenging him. And he has, like you said, no answers to the facts.
Right.
Then he finally says, Shawn, fine, you get money and you build your own organization to defeat us.
Exactly right. I mean, it's I really wonder, and I want to be really clear here. There's a big difference, I think, between the organization that is the Convention of States Action and their supporters. I think the people that support Convention of States Action are very much some well-meaning, very good people. And they recognize a lot of the problems in our country, whether it's the spending or it's the abuse of power. Now we're dealing with judges. Well, I guess the Supreme Court kind of dealt with them. But still, we got district judges that are, continuing to try to put in place nationwide injunctions, though the Supreme Court has said that that's not a thing. So, I mean, there are some things in our government that we need to change, and I think that well-meaning people see this as a solution. One of the answers that you get from people like Rick Santorum, I've heard him say it, Mark Meckler, I've also heard him say it in committee in Wyoming. Well, we've got to do something. We have to do something. There's such an emergency, and why are you so darn scared of any of this? You're just fear-mongering. Now, in your opinion, Shawn, I mean, that's it's an emotionally based argument, but how do you get around that? When you get people like Santorum and Meckler, and they fire up the committee, this is such an emergency, we've got to do something. How do you get around that?
Well, calling 911 because your house is on fire and a fuel truck pulling out that hose and spraying gasoline on your house because the fire truck's not there yet, that is doing something.
It is.
And I know that's an extremely rude, facetious argument, but it makes sense. Having said that, doing something, sometimes doing nothing is the right thing. Why are we fearful? It's an incredibly emotional argument. I used to think the more people that we got involved in politics, it was a better thing. I have to be honest, I don't know that I feel that way anymore because we're so emotional. The way that I persuade them is with that link that video I sent you from 2008. And anybody that's interested, reach out to me through guardtheconstitution.com later, my website. And if you don't have it, I'll send you the link. U.S. Senator Tom Coburn, who is now passed from Oklahoma, who also ended up being a paid supporter of Convention of States when he left the U.S. Senate, rightfully throughout his career riled against excessive spending. The man knew the Constitution well, yet, if you remember, the 2007-2008 housing crisis was a really big, serious problem. The Troubled Asset Relief Program was on the floor of the Senate, and he was debating it. And you know how unbelievably unconstitutional and bad that was. He actually says in this video, I know, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'm going to get it very close to correct. I know this bill is unconstitutional, but I'm gonna vote for it anyway. And I simply ask, and this got proven to me, my arguments I use now. About 3 years ago, I was doing a class in Las Vegas, Nevada to the Clark County Republican Central Committee. And I had about 22 hardcore COS supporters in there. that had been, rude, yelling, screaming, whatever. And I just said, listen, when I played this video and then debriefed the video, and all I had to say was, you give me the amendment that when ratified would prevent this good Christian man that knew better from doing that again. And then we can talk about how amending the Constitution would rein in the government. Most all of them came up to me after the presentation and were very polite and thankful. And they said, I've got some homework to do. You might have started changing my mind.
Yeah.
That's what we do, is the facts.
I want to go back for just a second to what I was alluding to in my speech on the House floor. And I talked about a misdiagnosis. And the proper diagnosis, in my view, is that we have a disengaged, apathetic voting public.
Yes.
If, we have term limits. One of the things I pointed to the room, and about half the people in that room has just been elected in the last 2 cycles. So you guys are proof that we have term limits when we have an engaged voting public. One of the problems with actually having term limits is I think that people are going to become even more disengaged because they think we fixed it. No, we won't fix it.
Well, and if you look at Wyoming, and I don't know the numbers for Nevada, but I'm assuming that they're probably pretty similar, that in Wyoming, only half of the people that are eligible to vote actually are registered. And only half of those who are registered really show up and vote on a regular basis. And so really, you've got 25% of the population that's voting. And so if you think that, the problems that we have in our government are a result of our founding document, which has next year will be 250 years. And the average lifespan of any constitution is, below 14 years. I think it's actually 11 to 14 years. But anyway, ours has lasted 250. And if you think the problem is with that document, you are, not to be impolite, horribly ignorant. The problem we have is with politicians. And, it's
easy.
Well, I didn't say that you were a politician, though you have some characteristics of it, Ken. But really, the problem is with folks who are being extraordinarily dishonest. And, one of the better arguments I heard was from one of the, I call them redcoats, but from one of the rhinos on the floor. And he stood up, and I was totally shocked. And he just said, I want to read you Article 5. And so he starts reading the whole thing, and he gets past the first way that you amend the Constitution, and then the Article 5 Convention, and then he reads the very last sentence, that the only thing that you can't do is deprive a state of its representation in the Senate, and 2 is to outlaw slavery before 1808. And then he says, okay, so we're past the whole slavery part. We get away with that. So really, the only thing a convention of states can't do is to deprive the states of their representation in the Senate. But there again, you crack open the Constitution with a convention, I suppose you could change that too, just depending on, whatever, if you got people to go along with you.
There's so much that they could do, and there's so much people don't know. The Constitution, if you just look at it as an average, man or woman on the street with your pocket Constitution, it looks a little rough, frustrating. But if you can take your time, go through it, read the Federalist Papers, maybe a few other documents, it's actually not that difficult. There's very few parts, in my opinion, of the Constitution that are that difficult to understand. And I'm talking in the original context that it was ratified, because that's how our laws, and the Constitution is our superior law, according to Article 6. When a law is passed, until changed or rescinded, that law remains in effect as passed. Having said that, the doors were, can you imagine June through September in Philadelphia with the doors closed back in those days with the powdered wig and the heavy, heavy clothing? And, but thankfully, Madison kept his notes. And we knew once he died what actually happened in there. And we know, I can show them the documents. Meckler will go, oh, that's not true. They didn't run away. They did what they were told. They had full authority. Michael Ferris, who's a law professor, that's one of their big co-founders. I love it because another thing I use is his textbook where he's got one of these pull quotes with the textbook is in, I'll paraphrase, but it basically says the only way to keep liberty or assure the protection of the law is constant vigilance. So this is one of the guys that's saying the only way to do it is to amend the Constitution, but wait a minute, you're a law professor and in your law class, you say something completely different. Yeah. He has some 50-page document he wrote that's published by the Harvard Law Review that, I have no clue if he did it or not, but I do know that you can pay to be published in there, and that's all I'm going to say. Do your own homework. And if you read this, it's incredibly painful, legalese, very high-level stuff. And he makes an interesting case. That's not the argument that they used. It's not related to what actually happened. Right. It's incredibly persuasive to the ignorant wonks.
Exactly. And, again, I want to be very clear. When I use the word ignorant, I don't mean that people are stupid, because I would never suggest that any of the folks that support this, I shouldn't say any, but the people like you and me that, just normal everyday Joes that support, I don't think that you're ignorant. I don't think that you're stupid. I think you're desperate. And I think that you've been sold a bill of goods that is very, very, very seductive. And if you're not looking at it, in a whole picture, you think that that's the solution, and it's not. It's extraordinarily dangerous.
I just wanted to mention something about Michael Ferris. I had the opportunity to debate him at one point, and he came out angry.
Yeah, that's what they are, man.
He was bitterly angry, and I'm kind of a jerk. I got up and basically told a fart joke. And won the crowd. It wasn't a flagrant fart joke. I won the crowd, and then I made a couple of solid points. And when it was over, he got up and left immediately. He would not stop and talk to anybody. But my point is, their arguments are all emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not actually thinking, which is kind of a liberal tendency in my view.
Actually, one of the first committees I testified in, Mark Meckler testified right before me. And the very last thing that he said, and again, I'm paraphrasing, I'll have to go back and watch the video, but he said that, people who are against this, you're an America-hating, baby-killing Marxist. And when he was done, he turned around, because I was sitting, one row behind where he was, and he looked right at me. And, he obviously knew who I was. And I got up to testify, and the very first thing I told the committee, which unfortunately was manned by a whole bunch of rhinos, very first thing I said was, I can assure you that I am not a baby-killing, America-hating Marxist. But if you believe this load, you absolutely are. And that's just the thing, right? I think that people need to do their own homework and stop believing what you're told. And, question. Thomas Jefferson said, question with boldness, even the very existence of God. And so if you're told something that sounds so good, it's probably too good to be true. And so, Shawn, what are some resources that people can go to really quick to, I know you mentioned your website, but if people want to look at a couple of different books, what would you suggest?
Specific to Article 5, I would look at Constitutional Brinkmanship by Russell Kaplan. There's not a lot of specific texts related to the study of this. I would, if you want, is Robert Nadelson is a retired law professor from the University of Montana.
Spooky.
He did not get emeritus status. I wonder why. He wrote a book called The Law of Article 5. There's a bunch of propaganda in there. Mm-hmm. It's a shame to me that a law professor wrote that. But I'm not afraid to tell people, look at it, figure it out for yourself, cross-reference things. Read the text of the Constitution. Get a pocket Constitution. It's not cute. It's essential. And then read the Federalist Papers. Federalist 78, the judiciary. The judiciary supremacy is not what people think it is. There's Federalist 40 is probably the best Federalist paper. There's many of them, but the best Federalist paper in Article 5, because it goes to how they rationalized exceeding their authority and actually said that the delegate commissions were advisory. And I say, why won't that happen again? And if you want, we can delve in the direction of a few nefarious things that I've seen those people do that are not money, but other things. Do your homework. There's plenty of sources out there. You can look at guardtheconstitution.com. I've got a few articles. We're rejiggering that, but you can always reach out on the emails after the show or social medias, and I'm happy to provide whatever sources we can. And as we roll out our efforts in the next few weeks more broadly, a lot of people are going to have a lot more in their hands.
Now, I got to run here in just a second, but one other book that I think I would add to your list, it's one of my favorites. It's called The Original Argument. Now, Glenn Beck's name is on the front of it, but he's not actually the one that wrote it. He put his name on it so that it would sell. But what it is it's essentially a retelling of the Federalist Papers, written in a language that we would use today. And the cool thing about it is after every Federalist that is rewritten, it's referenced. And so, you can look back at the original Federalist Papers and cross-reference it, but it's a really good guide to understand what's in the Federalist Papers. And again, like I say, if you have any question about it, pull out a copy of the Federalist Papers and compare it. And what you'll find is that it's an honest retelling of what the Federalist Papers actually say. So I would add that to the list.
And I have to follow that up, David, with saying that Glenn Beck was one of the earliest endorsers of Convention of States, and several years ago has since rescinded his endorsement and gives a good reason why. I respect that man greatly for that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I've got to run, Shawn, but if people want to reach out to you and get a hold of you, how do they do that?
guardtheconstitution.com or Shawn, SHAWN, at guardtheconstitution.com.
All right. Thank you once again, Shawn, for entertaining us for an hour. I appreciate it, and I'll make sure that Ken gets your contact information so that you guys can talk about a few things. So
thanks again for what you do, David. We'll see you in Sheridan at some point.
All right, Shawn. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, sir. Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. Yet another person that doesn't believe all of this Convention of States mumbo jumbo. And it's, again, this is just one of those things that's so seductive that if you're not careful, you're going to be sucked into it. And, and we talked about a lot of different things that you can read. And the first one needs to be the Constitution. And then just compare it with what you're told. I mean, the Convention of States Action, they hold open or, town hall meetings all over the place. And what you'll find is the very same thing that Ken said, is if you start to question what it is that they're saying, and you bring evidence, now they say bring the receipts. But if you flop out a book in front of them, for example, their own book, which we didn't mention, is called Conventions That Made America. And you can, I don't remember the page number, but there's a page in it that says at the Constitutional Convention, they absolutely did not have the authority to do what they did. They were sent there to revise the Articles of Confederation. And just like Shawn said, they realized that without Rhode Island, they were not going to be able to get a consensus on the Constitution. And so they changed the voting threshold from for unanimous to 3/4.
I didn't say this at the time, but Leah would be very disappointed if I didn't mention the JBS website itself. JBS.com, I think is what it is.
So. .org.
Or .org. Anyway, they have some very, very good material on there. Regardless of what side of the issue you're on, you need to look at the other side of the issue.
Exactly.
You, David, you were a champion speech and debate person, and you had to know the other argument just as well as you know your own. And in fact, in a lot of those, you didn't know which side you were going to argue till you got there.
Well, actually, all of them.
Yeah.
But you bring up a good point that we have a tendency to only read the things that we agree with, or the authors that we agree with, or we only watch the news channel that we like. And for me, for a long time, it was Fox News. But I'll tell you, my friends, you have to read the things that you don't agree with. You have to read the other side to understand those arguments. And I mean, that's the only way that you're going to find out if what you believe is actually true. And you read the things that you agree with, you read the things you don't agree with. You have to torture yourself every once in a while with PMSNBC, though I would not overdose on it. You'll end up looking like Rachel Maddow, and that's far worse than just sounding like her. But just read everything you can. And the very first thing that you should become familiar with is the Constitution itself. And your first big argument against the Convention of States is actually in Article 5. It's the last sentence, and it says that the only two things you can't do is deprive the states of their representation in the Senate or ban slavery before 1808. The Constitution is a beautiful document, and it's, the more that you know about it, the more that you read the words of the founders, the Federalist Papers, you'll understand how creative and how brilliant the guys that set up our country actually are. You'll find all sorts of awesome historical time bombs, like that one that's in Article 5, the 3/5 Compromise, a fascinating story to go through. But you can also, I've done several episodes on the Convention of States, this being one of them. And so, feel free to reach out to me. If you feel so inclined, you can Facebook, Twitter, whatever, X. It's pretty easy to get a hold of me. Now, one of the things that we didn't mention, and probably don't exactly have enough time to go through it, but we'll give it a shot. So Convention of States actually commissioned a group to write a new constitution, believe it or not. And on, I think it's page 13, maybe 13, 16, it's been a while since I looked at it. One of the very first things they do is they rewrite the Second Amendment. And, the Convention of States action, Mark Meckler, even your local guy that comes to your town hall will swear up and down that they didn't do that, and that's not them. Well, the document exists. And if you are willing to rewrite things as sacred as the Second Amendment or the First Amendment, there's no telling what you will do. And the reality is, if a Convention of States were to start, you never know what you're going to lose. You may lose the Fifth Amendment. You may lose the Fourth Amendment. You may lose the Second Amendment. And if you lose that one, you're going to lose the rest of them.
I'm quite confident you will lose the Second Amendment if you look at all these other states out there and how they've been persuaded, and the legislatures get to choose who goes. And
that's yet another thing we didn't talk about. Who are we sending to this thing?
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. It's very similar to our first topic with the nuclear waste.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of questions that we can't answer, and until those questions could be satisfactorily answered, and I don't think they can be.
Many of them can.
We have issues. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that'll do it for today's installment of the broadcast. Have a good rest of your afternoon, and we'll talk to you tomorrow where we'll have Wyoming Speaker of the House, Chip Nyman. That'll do it for today from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio. I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow, my friends.